All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, one easy address, X Zone Radio TV, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. And if you'd like to listen to any of the past shows, just go to xzonepodcast.com. My guests this hour, Exonation, Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith, are the authors of a very interesting book entitled Changing the Way We Die, Compassionate End-of-Life Care and the Hospice Movement. Their website is www.changingthewaywedie.com. And to both you, Sheila and Fran, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, Sheila, what was it that you decided, what was the reason to decide to write a book on changing the way we die with Fran?
Well, Fran and I have been friends and colleagues for years, and it turned out that our fathers died around the same time, so we started talking, as friends do, and it turned out we'd had very different experiences. Fran's father died after a long decline in the hospital, and my father also had a long decline, but he died in hospice. And our experiences couldn't have been more different.
Really?
So we started talking about that, and then when we started talking with other people about hospice, and invariably, if they had experience in hospice, it was this really moving experience with their loved ones, and people who worked in hospice were very passionate about their work. So we got intrigued and started looking into it, and we went from there.
Now, Fran, do you see a major change in the way that society is looking at death over the last 10 years?
Well, there's certainly been a change over the last 30 years. It was really a taboo subject back in the 60s and the 1970s. We're definitely seeing more people willing to talk about it, engage these issues. So many of us have seen people die in hospitals and intensive care units getting, such brutalizing treatment until the very, very, very last gasp. And people don't want to die that way. They don't want to see their loved ones die that way. So there's a shift.
Now, the hospice concept for those who are getting ready to make that final transition from this reality to what lies beyond the beyond, how long has this been in existence?
Well, it was started by a doctor in England, Cicely Saunders, and in the 70s she visited the United States, and it started gaining traction here because that was at the time when holistic health was starting to be talked about, and people were starting to talk about taking control of their own lives, in many aspects. But it really took off, as Fran said, in the last decade or so, and it jibes with our need to control our own lives and our health care, as well as the demographics of the baby boom, the coming tsunami, basically, of people who are going to need end-of-life care.
So it seems that the public became more aware of the hospice situation as more and more people with AIDS were getting their stories out.
Yes, certainly there was. AIDS really brought it to the fore, and also really led to a change in how hospices perceive their mission. Hospice began back, as Sheila was talking about, in the days of Cicely Saunders and the early hospices, hospice programs here in the States and in Canada, really as a program primarily for cancer patients. AIDS really shifted the focus because, lots of people die of lots of things, and it made no sense to focus strictly on cancer patients. So AIDS kind of came next, and now more than half of patients in hospice programs have non-cancer conditions and non-AIDS conditions, Alzheimer's disease, congestive heart failure, end-stage kidney disease, and other chronic illnesses, all the things that we die of today.
Ladies, please stand by. We have to take a 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back. X-Zone Nation, my two special guests this hour, Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith. They're the authors of Changing the Way We Die. And their website is www.changingthewaywedie.com. I'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break with Fran and Sheila as we continue talking about the title of their book, Changing the Way We Die, here on the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and on the Sirius Satellite Network. Don't go away. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com.
Do you have a dis-ease that you would like to alleviate through a natural means? Have you been contacted by angels, ghosts, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services free of charge for first-time clients contacting me during the month of April. These free consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you have always wanted to explore these types of experiences but were skeptical or simply could not afford them, then take advantage of this free special offer. Contact me through my website, aguidinglight, spelled lite.com, to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My guests this hour are authors Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith. Are the authors of Changing the Way We Die, Compassionate End-of-Life Care, and the Hospice Movement. Their website is www.changingthewaywedie.com. Sheila, what did you learn about hospice that you didn't know before you started researching your book?
Well, first of all, that hospice is not, I thought, as many people do, that hospice was a place, and it was a place, that you go to die, not a place anyone would want to go. Now, in the United States, hospice, by and large, is done at home. It's not residential as it is in many countries in the UK. We basically bring hospice to the people, to home, and that could be also in a nursing home, but we really don't have residential facilities. One of the people that we interviewed said she thought hospice was like she pictured it like a parking garage with people lined up, ready to go, and not a place anyone would want to go.
No.
And it turns out that hospice really is a philosophy of living, and it's a very life-affirming philosophy as well.
So why does the public have this misinformed concept of what hospices really are?
Well, I think the medical community, for the most part, doctors want to cure and want to keep curing and want to keep fighting. So they have been slow to embrace the hospice concept and educate their patients. Often when a hospice referral is made, it's treated as if, this is just like the last awful stop and all hope is gone. And we found in our book, and we described so many instances where people were really able to reclaim their lives when they went on hospice care. And, hospices themselves haven't really done a very good job of telling their story, and that's what we try to do in the book.
Are hospices privately owned? Are they government supported? Does a person have to pay through their insurance policy for a hospice, or do they have to pay cash? What's the financial breakdown of a hospice?
Well, in the United States, Medicare does pay for hospice, and in private insurance does as well. Now, the catch is that it is not 24-hour care. It involves a whole team of the doctor and the nurse and aides and 24-hour phone availability. Also spiritual care if you want it, but there's not somebody there 24 hours a day. So families, it's basically do it yourself for the family.
But if it's do it yourself for the family, why not bring the person home? Like, what's the sense of putting somebody in a hospice if they're not getting the 24-hour care, if they're not getting nursing, if the only thing is that they're not in the home?
No, I'm sorry. I'm maybe misled you. Hospice is not a place; it's a service. So the service does come to your home. The doctor comes to your home. The nurse comes to your home. If you want spiritual care, in fact. They will also offer help with practical things like, finding out where to get your taxes done and things that, financial things that you may have to deal with because the loved one is incapacitated. The services really are very broad, but not there on the spot all the time, as you would have in a hospital.
All right. Once again, I'm a little confused here, because what I'm hearing is, all right, the hospice is at your home. These people come to your home. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. So why do you call it a hospice then instead of home care?
Well, hospice is a really specialized services. Home care is a pretty broad term, and lots of patients get home care, and it can mean almost anything from hand-holding to aid washing you. Hospice is very specific for patients who have a 6-month life expectancy, and it is, as Sheila said, there's a team approach. There's a physician who's an expert in palliative care. There are nurses and social workers, and it's really about doing two things: helping people live as fully as possible in the time they have left, and helping people, and relieving suffering, helping people die in comfort and in dignity.
So, Fran, my grandmother, when I was a young lad, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was brought home to be taken care of. The doctor, Dr. St. Ange, a country doctor, would come to the house. The Victorian Order of Nurses came and taught my mother and my aunts how to give her the injections. Our minister came down and gave spiritual guidance. And that was called home care. So I'm having a very hard time understanding what the word hospice is. Now, to me, a hospice is a place, a building, where there are people who basically go in and never come out. So what's the difference between what my grandmother did with my family compared to what we're talking about now?
Well, in Canada, hospice is much more residential focused. You know, the kind of the building that you're talking about. In the United States, hospice in many ways looks like exactly what you're describing. But right here in this country, you know, there aren't country doctors who come and visit your home anymore. And hospice, in a way, it returns dying and death to families to doing it the way it was done, you know, in an earlier era, as an alternative to what has been happening, you know, both in the United States and really all over the world, which is that, you know, many people who have cancer and are about to die are in hospitals or getting chemo up until the last day. You know, there's not a doctor and a nurse and a spiritual care coming into the hospital to help them make the passage. It's brutal treatment until the very end.
Geez, I'm glad I live in Canada. You know, it seems so cold and callous. Basically, what it sounds like is, all right, you're sick, you're dying, we need the bed to make more money, go home.
No, it's not like that at all. It's most people on surveys, most people say they prefer to die at home.
Well, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? I agree with you 100%.
Right, yeah.
But it sounds as if the hospital, who makes a lot of money each and every day from the public, from the government, and from insurance companies, would rather have that bed available to a person who they can make a lot of money on compared to the person who is facing their final days.
Well, yes. But hospice is a way to support that person going home. So, yeah, I mean, but, you know, even if a person's facing their final days, hospitals can still make a fair amount of money on them. So, you know, hospitals don't necessarily want to shove them out the door in the final days.
So tell me, is it possible, Sheila, to have a good death?
Yes. My mother, my sister, and I were with my father the morning that he died, and it was very peaceful. It was just like the spirit, you know, went out of him, and he, you know, he wasn't there anymore. It reminded me of it's sort of a mirror image of when my children were born. You know, and there were two of us in the room, and plus the nurses and stuff. But and then suddenly there were three people, and it was the opposite with this. There were my family was there, the four of us, and then he was gone. I mean, his body was there, but he was gone. So I was really, you know, so reassured that it is possible to have a good death. Now, it's not always controllable, and often things happen that, you know, are hard to watch. But with hospice, they really take control of, or they help you do the best you can.
Did having your dad pass at home help with the closure and the grief compared to if your dad would have passed away in a hospital?
Well, actually, my dad was in a nursing home because, as we know, unfortunately, in this country, doctors, it was hard to have him at home. But but it was not like a hospital at all. When we brought in hospice, the whole staff changed. We got a different doctor, a different nurse. And there weren't, like, you know, buzzers going off all the time and a lot of, you know, action and all these tests and things. I mean, it was very peaceful. So it made a huge difference. And also, up until the time we brought in hospice, we were rushing time. We were, you know, he would fall and have to be off to the emergency room. So that was all eliminated.
How was that eliminated?
Because on hospice, once you agree to hospice, you stop care for your primary illness. You concentrate on comfort care and palliative care, so that he was not forced to get up for, like, for example, occupational therapy, which was, now that I look back on it, pretty ridiculous at that stage. But it was just, if he was in pain, we dealt with the pain, and he was able to visit with people, and just be as present as possible for his last months of life.
Ladies, please stand by. We have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour, Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith. They're the authors of Changing the Way We Die. Their website is www.changingthewaywedie.com. That's www.changingthewaywedie.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. And we're heard around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and the Sirius Satellite Network. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com is my email address. And you can listen to us 7/24/365 on your computer, on your iPad, on your iPod, and on your telephone by calling 213-401-0080. I'll be back on the other side of this news break, and words from our fine sponsors. Don't go away. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute, paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X-Zone radio show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365.
This is the X-Zone Radio TV show with Rob McConnell on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and our worldwide family of broadcast affiliates. If you have a question for Rob McConnell or his guest, or if you've had a paranormal experience, call toll-free 1-800-610-7035 extension 0 or email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, our one address is X-Zone Radio TV.
We're talking this hour to Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith. They're the authors of Changing the Way We Die, and their website is www.changingthewaywedie.com. Fran, it almost seems that having somebody in a nursing home, like, if you don't mind, Sheila, can I use your dad as an example?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. That, Fran's dad would fall, and basically he wasn't taken to emergency. It seems as if at times, from what I'm understanding, is there a difference between a hospice and assisted suicide?
Yes, there's a big difference, and in fact, a lot of the hospice leaders are really opposed to assisted suicide. The whole idea behind hospice is letting death occur naturally. You do nothing to stop it from occurring, and you do nothing to speed it along. Assisted suicide is an action to speed death along. Really, a physician writes a prescription for lethal doses of medication, and where it's legal here, for a competent patient, and then the person takes that medication. So, there's a big difference between the two.
But in any way, shape, or form, when a person enters the hospice, does anyone try to get that person better, or is it a foregone conclusion that this person will not get better?
No, well, the only foregone conclusion in the United States is that a physician will certify that if the person's primary condition were to run its natural course, they would likely not be alive in 6 months. That's the only
criteria.
Known for sure. Yeah.
But what happens, we found, and we have stories about this in the book, is that sometimes patients who, they go off chemotherapy, they go off all these so-called curative treatments, but they get really good palliative supportive care. They have a team that's looking at them not as specialists. The specialist is involved with this organ, and but looking at them as a whole person. And patients thrive. Sheila can talk about a person that a family she spent a lot of time with. A woman lived 18 months. Outlived the 6-month diagnosis and was really, really ill and debilitated and confused when she came into hospice care. And hospice got her back on her feet, going to the beach. And Sheila, why don't you pick up?
But no disrespect here, but did the lady still die?
Well, the lady was 93 years old.
Oh, God bless her.
So,
yeah,
the
all right.
remarkable thing was that her last 18 months, she was able to go to the beach. She was able to visit a nursery that had been her. She was an avid gardener, and the most important thing, she was able to attend her granddaughter's wedding, which would have been unthinkable before she'd been on hospice.
Well, this leads me to my next question. Then how can a doctor say that a person only has 6 months to live?
Well, that's a great question. Doctors are able to make these calculations, and based on how advanced the disease is. But there's really no hard and fast. It's not science so much as it's kind of an art, and even though they can use computer models and all that stuff, kind of a better way to think about it is asking. We met a doctor who flipped it around and said, if I didn't see this patient for 6 months, and I heard if the patient went away and I heard 6 months later that they had died, would I be surprised? So that's it's kind of educated guesswork really in many cases.
So how does a hospice in general help families?
Oh, in many ways. The hospice, the whole philosophy of the hospice is that, first of all, that the patient is not a disease, that the patient is a person, and the person has a family or loved ones, a support system, who also need help. So the hospice offers a social worker to help the family, like make a schedule, for example, of who's going to be there when. Also, as I mentioned, spiritual care, which turns out to be very helpful to people, to families in that time, and it also includes bereavement care for the family. And we've got a couple of chapters about people who joined a bereavement group when their spouses died, and this was the lowest point of their lives. They were just in despair,
of course,
and none of them wanted to go to a group. But all went reluctantly, and now they're like a family. They celebrate holidays together, and they're, in fact, 3 couples have emerged from this group. So they kind of show in these chapters, we show that life goes on.
Yes,
life
it does.
Go on.
I was wondering, Fran, if you could share with us some of the stories from your book.
Sure. Well, we open the book with the story of a man named Rusty Hammer, and that was really his name. And he was diagnosed with a rare leukemia at age 50. Just as he was turning 50, he had back pain, and it didn't go away, and he got an MRI, and it lit up a mass of tumors. And he was a go-getter. He'd been a political dynamo in California, very elected office at a very young age. And, he fought like hell. He went through treatment for 4.5 years, hundreds of nights in the hospital, hundreds of different medications, all kinds of surgeries. And when somebody suggested hospice 4.5 years into this, he was horrified by the idea. He thought it really meant giving up. Yeah. And a social worker came and posed the question, rather than think about giving up, said, Rusty, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And it really reframed the choice for him. And he ended up going into a hospice program, which meant he was home. He got care at home. He accomplished a lot in those last 6 months. Sheila, why don't you talk a little bit about Rusty?
Right. When he went to hospice, they eliminated these horrible trips to the doctor, which would involve, his wife getting him into the wheelchair and packing up all their things and getting to the hospital and, waiting for the doctor and waiting for a bed and waiting for all that, and then recuperating from that the next day. So instead of that, he was able to be at home and have a sort of a salon of his his high school buddies came over and they talked politics and they had pizza and he was able to write a book that he'd been wanting to. He wrote a book about cancer, and some high school kids made a play out of it, and so he was also able to interact with them, and he had his family with him at the end of his life, and he also died very peacefully at home.
In your book, are there any stories of children going through the hospice system, or is hospice more for the adults and seniors in our society?
Well, there are hospices for children, and they do incredible work with kids and with families. We don't include that in the book because it's a very different kind of system, and it brings up all kinds of different issues. So it was kind of hard to kind of meld the two together, but it's a really important area. Maybe the next book will do.
Yeah. How would people choose the best hospice for their best, fit best for their loved one?
Well, the most important thing is to start thinking about it before you need it. And most communities have a choice of hospices, so that and many of them are very community based, and so you might talk to friends who've gone through it. Another good way to kind of gauge whether this is the right organization for you is just to call and see what kind of reception you get on the phone. If you're just handed a questionnaire to fill out, then maybe that's indicative of the kind of treatment your family's going to get. You might try somewhere else.
What, in your opinion, now you ladies, how long did you, let's talk about the research that you did for your book. Who did you talk to? How long was the research period? And what were the awe-inspiring moments that each one of you found or discovered during the writing process?
Well, we spent about 2.5, 3 years researching and writing the book, and while we were writing, we're still researching. And we were journalists by profession. So we really took a journalistic approach, which is we talked with everybody and anybody who would talk with us. And really one of the amazing things was that we found families who had experienced hospice really wanted to talk about it because they had, for the most part, because they had had such good experiences, and it was really an unexpected positive at a time when life didn't seem to offer any. Awe-inspiring moments. For me, there were so many, and I'll tell you about, almost one of the really tiny ones. We write about a family in the book, a young family. The patient was 39 years old, and he lived with his wife and two young kids, and one of the kids had autism. And it was one of those, as we were talking about earlier, he actually was asked, because of insurance purposes, he'd been in an inpatient hospice, and where he did very well, and then he was sent home, where his wife was really, had hospice support, but was responsible for his care, and it was a very stressful situation at home. And one night, his catheter slipped out, and the wife called the nurse, and she was over. It's the middle of the night, and she came over, within minutes, and expertly reinserted the catheter, and then spent a long time, talked with everybody in the family to get everybody calmed down. And then at the end, it's like 2 or 3 in the morning, she just picked up the broom and started sweeping the kitchen. And the wife said, "Well, you don't have to do that." And she just said, "Well, we're here to help you too."
Fascinating.
Yeah, I would like to tell you one of the stories in our book that, when you mentioned awe-inspiring moments, the woman that I spoke of earlier who was on hospice for 18 months, her granddaughter had a baby right before she died. Well, she'd gotten very, very ill toward the last few weeks of her life, and her granddaughter had a baby. And as soon as the baby was 8 weeks old and able to travel, they brought the baby to meet her great grandmother, and so they brought the baby into the room, and everybody was there. And 12 hours later, the woman died. So the hospice doctor told me this story, and I was it's just like that was something wonderful that was enabled because the family chose hospice.
How do you deal with skepticism when someone says, "Oh, hospice, forget it"? And there's a lot of negativity out there in the world today. So how do you deal with this?
Well, I personally dealt with this with my mother throughout the writing of this book. Every time she'd ask me how the book was going before I could even answer, she'd say, "Oh, it's so depressing," And we just came out of this so inspired by the courage and the grace of, families and the caregivers and healthcare providers. And, that's what the stories in the book talk about. That's what we found to be incredibly life-affirming, and that's the message we're putting out. It doesn't have to be depressing, and the question about dying isn't if, but when, and that if we engage these things, as Sheila said earlier, if you think about these things earlier, you're really much better prepared to make good choices that allow you to live fully and that eliminate the possibility of a lot of futile medical care at the end of life.
All right, ladies, please stand by. We have to take our final break for this hour. Exonation, our guest this hour, are two ladies who have written a book. It's entitled Changing the Way We Die, Compassionate End-of-Life Care and the Hospice Movement. It's by Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith. And their website, www.changingthewaywedie.com. And where is your book available, Fran?
Well, all of the major online sellers, Amazon, iTunes, Apple Store, right. Barnes & Noble.
So online as well as brick-and-mortar stores?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's available. It's available in book form and in ebook.
Excellent. Fran Smith, Sheila Himmel, please stand by. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue talking about the Changing the Way We Die. Their website, once again, is changingthewaywedie.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back. Don't go away.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Exonation, Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith are our guests this hour. We're talking about their book entitled Changing the Way We Die, Compassionate End-of-Life Care and the Hospice Movement. Their website, www.changingthewaywedie.com, and their book is available on all online and brick-and-mortar stores in both print and in e-format. First of all, ladies, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. What are your final words for the people around the world who are listening this hour, Sheila?
Well, as Fran was saying, this is not a depressing topic. There are ways. There's a card game that you can play called Go Wish that helps you start the conversation about these issues, and it's something that families should do before they're in crisis, and they can really have take control of their last months and the last years of life.
And Fran, what are your final words for this hour?
Well, I would add to what Sheila was saying and say to people, even if you don't want to be thinking about these things for yourself, do it for your family. It makes such a huge difference to survivors when a loved one dies well.
Is there any evidence that having a person spend their final time in a hospice that it brings the family together? Does the family bond, and is the grieving period lessened by the hospice experience?
Well, the grieving period, that's uncontrollable, but the guilt is definitely relieved. I mean, people don't witness their loved ones dying tied up to machines and having all kinds of emergency things going on. As I said with my father, it was very peaceful. So people don't look back on it and say, "Oh, that was horrible." I mean, they're allowed to feel that they've done their best, and that helps them heal.
What is the percentage hospice versus traditional hospital?
Well, in the United States, it's 44% of deaths now take place in hospice care. So really, most people still are dying in hospitals, but that number has just really changed dramatically over the last 10 and 20 years.
Is it more? Is it more financial?
Yes.
Is it more financially advantageous for the family to have the person pass away at home, or more financially advantageous to have the person pass away in a traditional hospital?
Financially, it's so complicated because in this country, as you know, the insurance is very messed up. So it's not going to cost. I mean, the costs of hospice at home are only going to be if the family wants to bring in an aide or some, like a personal health aide to help in certain times. So that's not going to be a huge cost because you're not, they're not paying for the medication or the professional care, but they may need some kind of a home health aide, which is not an inconsequential cost, but that would be it.
Ladies, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We have to say so long for now, and continued success. And if you do write the book on the child or the children's hospice, I'd love to have you back on. Exonation, Sheila Himmel and Fran Smith have been our guests this hour. They're the authors of Changing the Way We Die and their website. Do you have your pencils and paper ready? All right. Their website is www.changingthewaywedie.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell. After all, this is truly a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, and we're coming to you around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network and the Sirius Satellite Network. Don't go away.